New Mexico has a lightly regulated tenant screening environment, with few state-level restrictions beyond the federal baseline. The governing framework includes the New Mexico Owner-Resident Relations Act, found in New Mexico Statutes Chapter 47, Article 8, which uses the distinctive terminology of owner and resident rather than landlord and tenant. Along with FCRA and the New Mexico Human Rights Act, this framework gives landlords broad discretion in the screening process while providing tenants with basic protections. Let's start with application fees. New Mexico does not cap application fees. There is no state statute limiting what a landlord can charge for tenant screening. The Owner-Resident Relations Act does not address application fee amounts, procedures, or refund requirements. Landlords can charge whatever they determine is reasonable to cover screening costs. Most New Mexico landlords charge between $20 and $45 per applicant. New Mexico's rental market is generally affordable relative to national averages, with the notable exception of Santa Fe, and keeping fees proportionate to actual screening costs is practical. Excessive fees discourage applicants in markets where the applicant pool may already be limited. Criminal history screening in New Mexico is unrestricted at the state level. New Mexico does not have a ban-the-box or fair chance housing law for housing. There are no state-level restrictions preventing landlords from asking about criminal history on the initial application. Landlords can inquire about arrests and convictions, can use criminal history as a screening factor without conducting a formal individualized assessment, and are not subject to state-mandated look-back period limits. No New Mexico municipality has enacted a comprehensive local criminal history screening restriction for housing. Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Las Cruces, and Rio Rancho all operate under the same unrestricted framework for criminal history screening. However, New Mexico has been active in criminal justice reform in other contexts. The state has expanded expungement eligibility and enacted provisions for automatic record sealing of certain offenses. Landlords cannot consider expunged or sealed records in screening decisions. Screening providers should be filtering these records, but landlords should verify their providers' compliance with New Mexico's expungement and sealing statutes. New Mexico decriminalized marijuana possession, and landlords should be cautious about using marijuana possession records as a basis for denial, particularly for amounts that are legal under current New Mexico law. The cannabis legalization landscape in New Mexico has evolved rapidly, and screening criteria should reflect current law rather than historical prohibition. HUD's 2016 guidance on criminal history and disparate impact applies in New Mexico. The state has a large Hispanic and Native American population, and criminal history policies that disproportionately affect these groups face potential scrutiny under federal fair housing law. New Mexico has 23 federally recognized pueblos and tribes, and Native American applicants represent a significant portion of the rental market in many communities. Blanket criminal history policies that cannot be justified by a legitimate business necessity create federal risk. Documenting your criteria and applying them consistently, considering the nature of the offense, time elapsed, and relevance to the tenancy, protects you under the federal framework. Source of income protection does not exist at the state level in New Mexico. Landlords are not prohibited from considering the source of an applicant's income when making screening decisions. Landlords can legally decline applicants who pay with housing choice vouchers, Social Security, disability payments, or other government assistance. No New Mexico municipality has enacted a local source of income protection ordinance. Participation in voucher programs is entirely voluntary. This is notable given the significant portion of New Mexico's population that receives some form of government assistance. New Mexico has one of the highest poverty rates in the country, and a substantial portion of the rental population relies on government income, including Social Security, disability payments, tribal income, and housing vouchers. Landlords who exclude all applicants receiving government assistance significantly narrow their applicant pool in many New Mexico communities. For credit reports, New Mexico follows standard FCRA requirements, permissible purpose, written consent, and adverse action notice procedures. New Mexico does not impose additional state-level requirements for credit report access, adverse action content, or notification timelines beyond FCRA. One practical consideration for credit screening in New Mexico: the state's economic challenges mean that applicants may have lower credit scores than landlords would see in more affluent markets. Setting credit score thresholds that are calibrated to New Mexico's local market conditions, rather than importing standards from higher income markets, ensures you don't exclude otherwise reliable applicants. A credit score that would be concerning in a prosperous suburb may be typical for an employed, stable tenant in New Mexico. Understanding the local credit landscape helps you set realistic criteria. New Mexico's fair housing protections under the New Mexico Human Rights Act, found in Chapter 28, Article 1, are broader than the federal baseline. Protected categories include race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, familial status, ancestry, age, spousal affiliation, and serious medical condition. The inclusion of sexual orientation, gender identity, ancestry, age, spousal affiliation, and serious medical condition goes substantially beyond federal protections. The spousal affiliation protection is distinctive. It prohibits discrimination based on being the spouse of a particular person. This prevents landlords from making screening decisions based on who an applicant is married to, which could arise in situations involving a spouse with a problematic background. The serious medical condition protection means landlords cannot discriminate against applicants based on a medical condition, including HIV/AIDS. While disability protections under the Federal Fair Housing Act cover many medical conditions, New Mexico's specific enumeration of serious medical conditions provides additional clarity and enforcement authority. The New Mexico Human Rights Bureau investigates fair housing complaints and has enforcement authority, including ordering damages, injunctive relief, and civil penalties. Fair housing enforcement in New Mexico is active, particularly in the Albuquerque metro area. From a practical standpoint, New Mexico's rental market is smaller than most states, but has distinct regional dynamics. Albuquerque is by far the state's dominant rental market. The Albuquerque metro, including Rio Rancho, Los Lunas, Bernalillo, and Corrales, contains roughly half of New Mexico's population. The economy is driven by Kirtland Air Force Base and Sandia National Laboratories, which together represent one of the largest concentrations of defense and nuclear research activity in the country. Healthcare, including Presbyterian Healthcare Services and the University of New Mexico Health System, the University of New Mexico, government, technology, and film production. Netflix and NBC Universal have invested heavily in Albuquerque's film studios, creating a growing entertainment industry presence. Kirtland Air Force Base and Sandia National Laboratories are the dominant employers in the Albuquerque area and generate significant rental demand from military personnel, civilian defense employees, and contractors. Military tenants and defense workers represent a reliable and well-compensated segment of the applicant pool. Landlords should understand military income documentation, leave and earning statements, and BAH rates, as well as the verification processes for federal, civilian, and contractor employees who may have classified positions that limit what their employers can disclose. Albuquerque's rental market is moderate, with steady demand and affordable rents relative to comparably sized metros. The city has experienced moderate growth, and some neighborhoods, including downtown, Nob Hill, and the North Valley, have seen revitalization and increasing rental demand. Santa Fe, the state capital, has one of the most expensive rental markets in New Mexico. Santa Fe's market is driven by state government, tourism. The city is a major cultural destination with world-renowned art galleries, museums, and restaurants, healthcare, and a significant population of affluent retirees and remote workers. Housing supply in Santa Fe is constrained by geographic limitations and strict building codes that preserve the city's historic adobe architectural character. Rents in Santa Fe are significantly higher than in Albuquerque, and the applicant pool includes a mix of government workers, tourism industry employees, artists, and higher-income professionals. Screening in Santa Fe requires attention to the diverse income sources in the applicant pool. Tourism industry workers may have seasonal or variable income. Artists and creative professionals may have irregular income streams. Government workers have stable but moderate incomes. Setting screening criteria that can fairly evaluate these different income types is important in a market with a uniquely diverse economic base. Las Cruces, home to New Mexico State University and near White Sands Missile Range and Holloman Air Force Base, has an affordable market influenced by the university, the military, agriculture, and proximity to El Paso, Texas. Military tenants from White Sands and Holloman represent a meaningful portion of the rental market. The university's enrollment creates student rental demand with the typical screening challenges of limited credit and rental history. Farmington and the Four Corners region have a market influenced by energy, oil, gas, and coal, and proximity to the Navajo Nation. The energy industry creates cyclical demand similar to what we discussed in our North Dakota video. Los Alamos, home to Los Alamos National Laboratory, has an extremely tight and unique rental market driven almost entirely by the laboratory. Housing in Los Alamos is limited, rents are high relative to the community's size, and the applicant pool consists primarily of laboratory employees and contractors with strong incomes and excellent employment stability. Roswell, Carlsbad, Hobbs, and the southeastern New Mexico communities have markets influenced by the oil and gas industry, particularly the Permian Basin activity that extends from West Texas into southeastern New Mexico. These communities have experienced boom and bust cycles similar to the Bakken in North Dakota, and screening approaches should account for the transient nature of the energy workforce. Taos has a small, expensive market driven by tourism and the ski resort. Silver City, Ruidoso, and other smaller New Mexico communities have limited markets with unique local dynamics. Native American communities across New Mexico, including the Pueblos and the Navajo Nation, have distinct housing dynamics. Rental housing on tribal land may be managed by tribal housing authorities, and the legal framework may differ from state law. Landlords who own rental property near tribal communities should understand the specific cultural and legal considerations that apply. One best practice for New Mexico landlords: calibrate your screening criteria to New Mexico's specific economic conditions. The state has lower average incomes and higher poverty rates than the national average. Setting income-to-rent ratios and credit score thresholds based on national standards may exclude a large portion of otherwise reliable applicants. Research comparable properties in your specific market and set criteria that identify genuinely high-risk applicants while remaining realistic for the local economy. Another best practice, given New Mexico's broad fair housing protections, including sexual orientation, gender identity, spousal affiliation, and serious medical condition, train everyone who handles applications on the full scope of protected categories. New Mexico protects more categories than most states, and screening decisions that inadvertently touch on any of these categories can generate complaints. Ensure your application form doesn't request information about marital status, medical conditions, or other protected characteristics unless it's directly relevant to a legitimate screening criterion. A third best practice, for landlords near military installations and national laboratories, develop efficient processes for verifying defense-related income. Military income verification is straightforward through leave and earnings statements, but federal civilian and contractor employees, particularly those at Sandia National Laboratories, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and Kirtland Air Force Base, may work in classified positions where employers are limited in what they can disclose. Have a process for verifying income through pay stubs, tax returns, or other documentation when employer verification is restricted. New Mexico limits the security deposit to 1 month's rent for leases of less than 1 year and no more than a reasonable amount for longer leases. The deposit must be returned within 30 days of the tenant vacating. The 1-month cap for short-term leases makes thorough screening essential. Your financial protection is limited, so getting the tenant selection right is critical. For the complete guide to New Mexico tenant screening laws, visit tenantscreeningbackgroundcheck.com. Subscribe to our channel for every state in our tenant screening law series.